The 1966 TV Batmobile is the most famous custom car in Hollywood history, but just listen to its real roar. If you love discovering the hidden history behind legendary cars, subscribe to Forgotten Detroit. Long before it patrolled Gotham, this machine was a serious 1950s concept vehicle built by Ford, costing the modern equivalent of $2.9 million. So how did their space-age crown jewel end up sold off to a Hollywood customizer for exactly $1? To understand how a multi-million-dollar investment became a $1 bargain, you first have to look at Detroit in the early 1950s. At the time, concept cars were not just static art pieces bolted to a showroom floor. Automakers used them as highly expensive public barometers to predict future styling trends. They would build wild, experimental machines and tour them across the country on the auto show circuit. Executives closely watched the crowd reactions, using that direct feedback to decide which futuristic features would actually make it into mass production on standard commuter cars. Ford was locked in a fierce design war with General Motors, and the company desperately needed an absolute showstopper. The task fell to lead Ford styling designers Bill Schmidt and John Najjar. While the rest of Detroit was strictly looking at fighter jets and rockets for their jet-age inspiration, Schmidt looked to the ocean. Following a scuba diving trip in the Bahamas, Schmidt became captivated by the sleek, menacing movements of marine life beneath the surface. He and Najjar began drafting a massive vehicle directly inspired by manta rays and mako sharks. The resulting design featured a wide, flat hood, aggressive gill-like air vents carved into the quarter panels, and sharp, sweeping rear fins. To top it off, they added twin clear plastic bubble canopies instead of a traditional roof, giving it an undeniable flying saucer aesthetic. When Ford executives saw the initial sketches for what would become the Lincoln Futura, they approved the project immediately. However, they set a massive challenge for their team. They did not just want a hollow fiberglass shell or a heavy clay model to sit silently under the auto show lights. They wanted a fully functioning spaceship for the road. It had to be a complete, street-legal vehicle with a working chassis, functional interior instruments, and a real internal combustion engine ready to fire up. Just listen to what that ambition sounded like. That mechanical roar came from a 368 cubic inch Lincoln V8 engine generating 300 horsepower. This massive powertrain proved the prototype was a genuine, functioning beast. To achieve this level of bespoke engineering, Ford shipped a modified Lincoln chassis across the Atlantic to the renowned coach builder Carrozzeria Ghia in Turin, Italy. Italian artisans hand-hammered the massive metal body panels to bring the oceanic sketches into reality. This meticulous overseas craftsmanship came with an astronomical bill, bringing the construction cost for this single vehicle to a staggering $250,000. Ghia packed the finished car with insane design specifications. The interior dashboard featured futuristic push-button transmission controls integrated into a central pod. Above the seating area, designers installed a double clear plastic dome canopy, fully enclosing the driver and passenger without the need for traditional metal roof pillars. The final exterior finish required a highly unconventional approach. To accurately replicate the shimmering skin of a manta ray, the team formulated a custom pearlescent paint. The secret ingredient responsible for the car's icy blue-white glow was a heavy dose of real, finely ground fish scales mixed directly into the lacquer. Lincoln Futura made its highly anticipated public debut at the 1955 Chicago Auto Show. The crowd response was overwhelming, prompting Ford to take the $250,000 car on a nationwide public relations tour. To prove this Italian-built prototype was a fully functional street machine and not just a static display model, Benson Ford Sr. famously drove the concept car straight through the dense traffic of Manhattan. It was an unprecedented PR stunt that put the futuristic vehicle on the front pages of newspapers across the country. That widespread media attention eventually caught the eye of Hollywood executives. In 1959, the Futura landed a starring role alongside Debbie Reynolds and Glenn Ford in the romantic comedy It Started with a Kiss. However, the original icy blue-white finish did not translate well on film. To ensure the car stood out clearly on camera, the studio ordered a complete respray, covering the expensive, hand-mixed fish-scale lacquer with a heavy coat of solid bright red paint. Despite its success on the silver screen, the Futura was living on borrowed time. Concept cars rarely have long lifespans. They exist strictly to gauge public reaction to radical new styling cues. Once the cutting-edge elements of the Futura, like its hooded headlights and dramatic rear tail fins, were adapted into regular production models for everyday consumers, the original prototype lost its unique value. Within a few short years, the automotive industry shifted away from aerospace-inspired curves toward sharper, more conservative designs. The once beloved Futura transformed from a visionary engineering masterpiece into an obsolete artifact, a forgotten relic parked in a back lot, quietly awaiting its inevitable trip to the scrap heap. Automakers typically destroy outdated concepts to prevent liability issues and protect trade secrets. However, crushing the famous Futura would have generated terrible public relations for Ford, while also costing them money in disposal fees. Enter George Barris, a prominent Hollywood vehicle customizer who had already worked with the car during its movie production. To solve their problem quietly, Ford executives arranged an unusual transaction. They transferred the legal title of the $250,000 engineering marvel over to Barris. The final purchase price was exactly $1. Barris towed the 1955 prototype back to his custom shop in North Hollywood, California. Without a specific project in mind for the massive bubble-topped vehicle, he parked the Futura in a chain-link storage alley behind his building. It sat there completely exposed to the elements. For several years, the once glamorous show car functioned as little more than a background curiosity in the back lot, slowly deteriorating as the seasons passed. The thick layer of red studio paint baked in the sun, eventually fading and flaking away to reveal patches of the original icy blue-white lacquer underneath. The structural integrity of the vehicle was also failing. Deep stress cracks started developing throughout its original chassis, burdened by the immense weight of the hand-formed metal panels and the passage of time. To any outside observer, Barris had wasted his $1 on a decaying yard ornament. Yet the builder refused to scrap the machine, letting it sit behind his shop on the chance that a studio might eventually need it. The peeling paint and fractured chassis were simply part of a long hibernation, bridging the gap between a forgotten Ford experiment and the ultimate television transformation. In late 1965, the producers of a new TV series approached Barris with an urgent request. They were developing a live-action Batman show starring Adam West and needed a flagship vehicle for the Caped Crusader. But there was a massive catch. The studio gave Barris a budget of $15,000 and exactly 15 days to design, build, and deliver a fully functional, camera-ready Batmobile. Building a custom car from the ground up usually requires several months of fabrication and engineering. Facing an impossible deadline, Barris realized his only option was to heavily modify a pre-existing platform. He immediately thought of the decaying Ford concept car sitting in his storage alley. The Lincoln Futura provided a ready-made canvas. Its original mid-century design already looked like something pulled straight from the pages of a comic book. The dramatic, outward-canted tail fins perfectly mirrored the shape of trailing bat wings, while the exaggerated hooded headlight pods gave the front fascia a menacing, masked appearance. Because Ford had already completed the heavy engineering and structural bodywork a decade earlier, Barris skipped weeks of complex metal shaping. He simply needed to adapt the existing aerodynamic lines to fit the superhero theme. The modification process required intense, around-the-clock labor to meet the deadline. Barris and his crew stripped the deteriorating body panels and permanently eliminated the massive clear plastic bubble canopies that originally defined the Futura. In their place, they installed dual open-air windshields to ensure the cameras could easily film the actors during driving scenes. The team reshaped the nose, extended the scallop trailing edges of the fins, and coated the entire exterior in gloss black paint. They applied fluorescent cerise red pinstriping to highlight the aggressive contours of the metalwork. To complete the illusion, the shop packed the cabin and trunk with custom TV gimmicks. They installed a mock jet exhaust turbine in the rear center, a bat computer on the dashboard, a flashing red beacon light on the center roll bar, and aluminum rocket tubes behind the seats. They also added a front-mounted chain slicer and rear parachute packs to sell the crime-fighting fantasy. On the 15th day, Barris delivered the vehicle to the studio on schedule, successfully transforming a discarded Ford experiment into a permanent pop culture icon. Ironically, a serious corporate styling exercise accidentally became the most famous vehicle in pop culture history. Barris kept this original Batmobile until 2013, selling it at auction for $4.62 million. Thanks for watching. Tell us in the comments, would you rather park the pearl white 1955 Futura or the crime-fighting 1966 Batmobile in your garage?